Think about the last time you were truly honest with someone. Not just polite, not filtered, but raw, clear, undeniable. Maybe you told your partner the connection was dying. Maybe you admitted to your family that their support always felt conditional. Maybe you looked your friend in the eyes and said, "I don't trust you anymore." You spoke the truth because you believed in that beautiful idea. The truth will set you free, but it didn't. Instead, it set them free. Free to pull away, free to get defensive, free to label you as difficult, toxic, or too intense. And you were left with silence. Or worse, polite smiles masking deep resentment. We've been fed a dangerous illusion. That honesty is the golden key to deeper love, stronger bonds, and mutual respect. But the honest know this: truth doesn't always connect. Sometimes it severs, it cuts, it threatens the illusion that relationships are built on. Carl Jung once wrote, "The truth does not make us free, it makes us conscious." And consciousness, real, brutal self-awareness, is not what most people want. They want comfort. They want agreement. They want shared delusion. They don't want to see themselves. They want to be seen through a flattering filter. And when your honesty doesn't flatter, you become the threat. You become the negative one. You become the reason the group dynamic feels off, on. So you start to wonder, is something wrong with me for seeing clearly? Why does telling the truth feel like betrayal? Why do I get punished for naming what's real? You're not broken. You're just awake. And awakening is a violent act in a sleeping world. The honest suffer not because they're wrong, but because they see too much. They notice the tone that doesn't match the words, the smile that hides a wound, the system that feeds on silence, the love that's really control, the peace that's really repression. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But most people don't want to see it. They don't want truth. They want continuity, even if it's built on denial. So what happens to the honest? They retreat. They quiet down. Or worse, they learn to lie. Not with words, but with absence. They stop showing up fully, because every time they did, they paid for it. That's the wound of the honest man. Not that he sees truth, but that he no longer knows what to do with it. From the moment you could speak, you were given a script, a story repeated over and over again, by teachers, parents, media, religion. Be honest, and people will love you. Say what you feel, it's the right thing. Truth will build trust. It sounds noble. It sounds moral. It sounds human. But the problem is it's not true. At least, not in the way they told you. You were taught that honesty is a bridge, that if you just speak openly, you'll connect, you'll be respected, you'll be understood. But what actually happens? You express a deep fear, and they call you too emotional. You point out an uncomfortable truth, and they say you're ruining the mood. You show your authentic self, and they go quiet, change the subject, or walk away. You were programmed to believe that truth is currency. But in reality, it's a threat. Not to everyone, just to those who depend on illusions to survive. Carl Jung knew this well. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And that includes hating you for showing them something real." This is the lie of the programming. That honesty leads to love. That openness leads to safety. That truth leads to belonging. But truth doesn't lead to safety. It leads to exposure. And exposure is terrifying not just for you, but for everyone else in the room. So what happens? You begin to shrink yourself. You filter your words. You dilute your thoughts. You learn to smile while dying inside. All because, somewhere deep down, you still believe that honesty should work. That maybe the next person will handle it better. That maybe they'll actually see you. But again, they don't. Not because you're wrong, but because they're not ready. And most people aren't. So you face a brutal realization. Honesty without discernment isn't virtue. It's self-harm. It's bleeding in front of people who don't even know what blood means. You were trained to believe that speaking your truth is noble. But the truth is, it's not always useful. It's not always welcomed. It's not always safe. And unless you understand where and when to speak it, you'll keep getting hurt by your own sincerity. This isn't about becoming fake. It's about becoming wise. Because the world you were programmed for doesn't exist. And now that you see that, you can start rewriting the script. Every person you meet is running an internal economy, an emotional system carefully designed to maintain one thing: psychological stability. They've built a belief structure, an identity, a story about who they are, how the world works, and what makes them feel safe. And here you come, with your truth. You think you're offering clarity, insight, growth, but to them, you're causing instability. You're disrupting their economy. And economy don't like disruption. When someone's internal system is built on denial, honesty is inflation. It devalues everything they thought was true, and they will protect their system the same way a government protects its currency, by suppressing anything that threatens it. Even you, especially you. That's why when you speak the truth, they hear attack, not care. They feel exposed, not seen. They react with defense, not curiosity. You're not wrong. You're just expensive. Too expensive for their emotional budget. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He said, people don't see the world as it is. They see it as they are. Which means, your truth, no matter how pure, will always be filtered through their fear, insecurity, shame, and trauma. If it threatens their self-image, they won't thank you. They'll reject you, not because of what you said, but because of what it cost them to hear it. This is emotional economics. Everything has a price. Truth is the most expensive currency of all, because it forces people to confront what they've avoided for years: that their marriage is dead, that their childhood wasn't normal, that their kindness is performative, that their strength is really avoidance, that their love is actually control. You're not just telling them facts, you're inviting them into grief. And most people would rather live in a lie than grieve a truth they're not ready to hold. So what do? They blame you. They gaslight you. They label you difficult, cold, insensitive, unstable. Why? Because it's cheaper than changing. And here's the dangerous part. If you don't understand this, you'll start questioning yourself. You'll start thinking, maybe I am too much. Maybe I should stay quiet. Maybe I'm the problem. You're not. You're just the only one in the room who isn't afraid of paying the price. But that doesn't mean you should always offer your truth. Because just like money, if you spend it in the wrong place, it loses its value. Wisdom is not having truth. It's knowing when to use it. He was told that being honest makes you good, that being open makes you strong, that being vulnerable makes you lovable. So he tried. He shared his fears. He spoke from the heart. He admitted his insecurities. He told the truth, even when it hurt. And what did he get? Dismissed, ignored, laughed at, labeled too sensitive, too needy, too intense. This is the nice guy's tragedy. He believes truth will win him love. But in the real world, truth without boundaries leads to collapse. Because he's not just honest, he's available, too available. He gives his truth to people who haven't earned it, who don't have the depth to receive it, who see his emotional openness not as strength, but as weakness. The nice guy thinks honesty is a bridge, that it will connect him to others. But for most, it becomes a trap, a way to disqualify himself in the eyes of those who are still asleep. Because real truth, when it's raw, unpolished, and emotionally charged, makes people uncomfortable, especially if they haven't done the inner work to hold space for it. Carl Jung warned, if one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. The nice guy keeps trying to be understood, keeps offering more truth, keeps bleeding more openly, hoping someone will finally see him. But what he doesn't realize is this: he's playing the wrong game. Most people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for certainty, for roles, for comfort. The nice guy breaks that mold. He brings uncertainty, depth, self-reflection. pain. Not because he's harmful, but because he's awake. And in a world that runs on performance, his honesty makes him incompatible. So what happens? He collapses. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, privately. He starts withholding. He questions his worth. He stops trusting his own perception. He wonders, what's wrong with me? Why do they pull away when I'm finally being real? The answer is brutal. Nothing's wrong with you. You're just not in the right environment. You're a mirror, and people who hate their reflection will always smash the glass. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to stop handing your truth to those committed to misunderstanding it. Because if you don't, you won't just collapse emotionally. You'll collapse spiritually. You'll stop being who you are, just to be accepted by people who never wanted to see you clearly in the first place. And that is the slow death of the honest man. There comes a point after the collapse, after the confusion, after the self-doubt, when something inside you goes quiet, not from defeat, not from despair, but from realization. You stop sharing your truth so freely, not because you've become dishonest, but because you've become discerning. You realize not everyone deserves access to your inner world. This is where the Stoic shift begins. You stop assuming that truth is always helpful. You stop trying to be understood. You stop trying to be loved for your vulnerability. And you start asking smarter questions. Does this person have the capacity to hold what I see? Will this truth help or just provoke? Am I speaking for connection or for ego? Most of the time, you realize they're not ready. And that's okay, because now you're not here to bleed truth. You're here to embody it. Carl Jung described this evolution as individuation, the process of becoming whole. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming who you are also means realizing who is no longer meant to receive you. So you begin to pull back not from fear, but from clarity. You move from being reactive to intentional, from emotional exposure to emotional containment, from trying to connect to learning to observe. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. Because now your words aren't about being liked. They're about being accurate. You no longer feel the need to correct every lie, to expose every illusion, to confront every shallow interaction. You start to hold power in silence. Not the silence of repression, but the silence of sovereignty. You don't correct them when they pretend to be happy. You don't challenge every performative friendship. You don't call out every red flag in the room. Because now you understand. Some truths are meant to be carried, not spoken. This doesn't mean you've become cold. It means you've become strategic. Your honesty is no longer a reflex. It's a weapon, unsheathed only when necessary. You begin to master restraint, and this is what makes you dangerous. Not because you lie, but because you see and choose not to speak. You're no longer a man who needs to be seen. You're a man who chooses where and when to reveal himself, if at all. And that shift is when you stop collapsing for truth and start commanding with it. There's a moment after you've burned from being too honest, after you've bled in front of people who didn't deserve to see it, where you realize something crucial. It's not the honesty that broke you. It's the attachment behind it. You were attached to being understood, to being validated, to being loved for being real. And that attachment made you vulnerable in the wrong ways. Emotional detachment isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's the shift from reaction to observation, from impulse to precision, from exposure to restraint. You no longer say, "Here's everything I feel, please handle it with care." You now say, "This truth is mine, and not everyone gets to touch it." Not because you're hiding, but because you've matured. Carl Jung once said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And when you awaken, you stop begging the outside world to meet you. You start building a world within that no one else can control. Detachment doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you're no longer ruled by what you feel. You still care, but you're not consumed. You still notice, but you don't need to act on every emotion. You become deliberate. Now, when someone disrespects you, you don't explain. You withdraw. When someone misunderstands you, you don't plead. You observe. When someone asks for your truth, you ask yourself, are they strong enough to handle it? Or are they just curious until it cuts too deep? This is discipline, not the kind you show to others, but the kind you show to yourself. You stop oversharing. You stop apologizing for your intensity. You stop giving your truth like it's a gift for everyone to unwrap, because it's not. Your truth is sacred, and sacred things require boundaries. Just like a temple has walls, your inner world deserves protection. Detachment lets you stand in a room full of lies and still keep your integrity intact. It lets you walk through chaos and remain centered. It lets you be honest without needing a reaction. That is emotional power. Sooner, you don't stop being honest. You just stop offering it to people who haven't earned the silence it takes to understand it. You become still, precise, measured, and in a world of noise, that silence becomes unshakable strength. So you stopped over-explaining. You stopped offering unearned honesty. You stopped bleeding in front of people who never asked how deep the wound was. And now, you're colder. Not cruel, not unfeeling. Just colder. Colder than you were when you thought truth would save you. Colder than when you believed people wanted depth. Colder than when you shared everything hoping someone would finally say, I see you. And there are consequences. Real ones. You will lose things. You lose the illusion of connection with people who only loved the soft version of you. You'll lose your seat at tables where comfort matters more than clarity. You'll lose relationships that only worked when you were agreeable, vulnerable, and easy to digest. People will say you've changed, that you're distant, that you've built walls. And maybe they're right. But those walls didn't grow out of bitterness. They were built from repeated exposure to betrayal, to misunderstanding, to emotional theft. Carl Jung wrote, loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. End quote. And when your truth becomes too sharp, too deep, too real, you stop trying to communicate it altogether. You become the man in the room who watches more than he speaks. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he knows most people don't really want to listen. There's grief in this coldness. You miss being soft. You miss being open. You miss believing that honesty could heal everything. But you also know the cost of being naive. So you stay cold. And in that coldness, you find something else. Control. You're no longer reacting. No longer chasing. No longer offering what no one valued. You speak when it's time. You act when it's right. You choose who sees you and how much. And suddenly, your presence begins to shift. You no longer feel the need to prove your value. You embody it. You no longer demand respect. You command it through discipline, through detachment, through depth. This coldness has a cost. Yes, but it also creates clarity. Because now, the only people who get close to you are the ones who've earned the silence it took to reach you. And those few, they don't run when it gets honest. They stay, because they've done the work too. So here you are, not broken, not bitter, just clear. You've walked through the fire of honesty. You've seen what it costs. You've felt the sting of being misunderstood, mislabeled, misused. And now, you carry your truth differently. You no longer wave it like a flag. You wear it like armor, invisible to the world, but always with you. This is your final realization. Truth isn't something you give. It's something you are. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to explain it to those committed to misunderstanding you. You live it. Quietly, powerfully, unshakably. Carl Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." And honesty, true honesty, is a kind of inferno. It burns through illusion. It destroys comfort. It leaves you standing alone, but clean. You realize you're not here to save anyone with your insight. You're not here to be loved for your rawness. You're not here to bleed in every room that feels emotionally safe. You're here to walk your path, fully, deliberately, without apology. And those who are meant to walk with you, they won't need you to explain who you are. They'll already know, because they've walked through their own fire too. So what do you do now? You stop chasing alignment. You become alignment. You stop offering truth as a gift. You hold it as your compass. You stop asking, who will understand me? And start asking, who am I still hiding from when I already know the truth? This is the honest man's path. Not louder, not softer, just truer. Less explaining, more observing, less defending, more choosing. You no longer need to be believed. You need only to be congruent between what you see and how you live. You're not here to belong. You're here to be real. And the more real you become, the fewer people can walk beside you. But the ones who do, they won't run when the truth gets sharp. They'll sharpen with you. In the end, honesty won't give you a crowd, but it will give you yourself. And that is the only person you can never afford to lose.